Hi guys, Jessica here from the Healing Hands Duo, and I'm here with Kevin again today. So what today's video is actually going to be about is we're going to be finishing off a video that we started back in July of 2018 of last year, and that was why one diet doesn't fit all. And the reason why I really wanted to do this video today was because of this constant debate that's happening all over YouTube right now, where it's the carnivores battling the raw foods vegans. And this has kind of gotten out of hand, and if you're following this on YouTube like I am, it's been quite intense. So I didn't really want to come here to tell people that they shouldn't be a raw carnivore or a raw foods vegan. Instead, what we wanted to do was bring some other perspectives to the table, and why nutrition is not just all about diet and food in general, and that there are a lot of things that will drive some of your nutritional requirements. And a couple of those things would be, like, for instance, your environment, your genetics, blood type, and various other things. And the other thing that I did want to say was that we actually did speak about some of this stuff, or at least the things that we have learned over the years, in our last video. So if you haven't seen that video yet, I will post that up above so that you can look at that, because I don't want you guys to think that we're coming from a place where we haven't done our research. Okay, so the one thing that I have commonly noticed amongst all of these videos that I've been watching, where they kind of battle each other going back and forth from the raw foods vegans to the carnivores, is that they just mention specifically what they're eating in the food. And I get that, but the thing is a lot of people aren't taking all the different factors into account here, which is going to drive your nutritional requirements. And I kind of said that in the intro part of this video. And the thing is like, for instance, just a few things to point off here, like ethnicity and genetics. The thing is, over time, evolution, and I know a lot of people go back, and that's why a lot of people tend to eat like paleo and things like that, is because they're saying we should eat based on our ancestors. Well, in that case, if that was the truth, and you know, a lot of the carnivores are currently saying now that we should be eating meat because that's what our ancestors would have eaten, we also have to take into consideration that there are countries around the world that weren't eating high amounts of meat, or that there were parts of the country and parts of the world that were eating a really high Mediterranean, like a Mediterranean diet, high in seafood. So really, your genetics, I think evolution would show that our genetics kind of changes as we have immigrated to other countries, or also from where our ethnicity would have come from, our heritage would have come from. For instance, me, I grew up on a lot of seafood, and I did really well with that diet. It wasn't until I started switching my diet over to a more Western diet that I started to have real issues. And for everyone that knows me, you know that I have Crohn's colitis, and that disease usually tends to hit a lot of younger people in their younger years, but that actually didn't come on for me until my 20s, and I really attribute a lot of that because I was swaying so far away from what my genetics or my ethnicity or my heritage would have ate, which was a lot of seafood. I think Kevin and we kind of agree on some foods, and some foods we don't. And I think one of the reasons too is not just the genetics and the ethnicity, but is also blood type diet. And I mean, it was a blood type diet that we had read, and I think that also plays a role as well. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, for sure. I've always been blood type A, so for blood type A's, usually they're seem to work a little bit better off vegetarian type foods, believe it or not. You know, a little less meat, especially red meat, you know, things like chicken, turkey. I don't eat that much of it. I just never really agreed with me. Seafood's a different story. I eat a lot of seafood, but for me being blood type A, it's always been, you know, more veggie type foods have always worked well for me.
Yeah. But
for Jessie, she's type O, it's been completely the opposite.
Yeah, and I think, again, I'm going to be a little bit biased here, because when I was really sick with my Crohn's and my colitis, I could not eat raw vegetables. And that's another thing that I kind of, one of the things that I've been finding across a lot of these videos that I've been watching, and it's been I don't want to say offensive, because that's not my style to say that, but I've seen a lot of people who are like, oh, people who eat meat, you know, they're like murderers and stuff like that, and that it is a bit offensive, because when I was really at my sickest, the only thing I could survive off of for a very long time was bone broth and animal-based products. I could not eat, for the life of me, vegetables, and fruit was out of the question unless it was really overcooked and it was like maybe an apple. And a lot of vegetables had to be cooked to mush. Raw foods for me wasn't even an option, because I wasn't able to deal with any of the anti-nutrients in it. I wasn't able to deal with any of the fiber. But the thing is, what we were getting back to the blood type diet is I'm O type too. So what we've read there is that O types tend to have a lot of acid in their stomachs, so they are more prone to being able to digest things like red meats. I don't eat a lot of red meat to this day. Like, I used to, but not much anymore. But we do eat a lot of fish, and I still do eat poultry and other animal-based products. We do eat a lot of eggs as well. So, and that's something, like we've said before, he tends to do a little bit better with eating a little bit more vegetarian, vegan foods, and I tend to do a little bit better with some animal-based products. However, I can handle eating raw food, raw vegan foods now as well, now that I've gone through gut healing and whatnot. Another aspect is kind of like these people, again, are talking about all these things, but nobody's really mentioning your age and how that's going to affect what you're able to digest as well. And I think there, what I kind of wanted to discuss a little bit was that it all really depends on your hydrochloric acid that you have in your stomach and the enzymes that you have. So if you've pretty much your whole life eaten a lot of cooked foods, then you're gonna have very little enzymes available still to use at that point when you get to a certain age. So, you know, maybe eating some of these really heavier meats and stuff like that, even your hydrochloric acid, if it's not really at par, it's also going to be very difficult to eat some of these like red meats and stuff like that, which is why a lot of them argue that you should be eating red meat raw, which I don't think a lot of people are going to find that very palatable to be eating raw red meat and whatnot. So
doesn't really appeal to me. You know, I don't know, I'm not judging it or anything, but you know, being type A, I just can't see myself eating a lot of meat. I just don't feel good off eating a lot of meat. Never did.
Yeah.
So it's just not something that agrees with me. But then at the same time, you know, going full-blown raw vegan, that's a different story too, because I like to eat a lot of raw food, and I like to eat more vegetarian type foods, but to go like fully 100% raw across the board, I don't think I could do that either. So I think, you know, both these diets seem to have some pretty good, you know, they talk about some pretty important stuff on both sides. There's no question about that. But
absolutely,
I think for Jesse and I, we always try and meet in the middle here. We try and find the neutral ground between both, and I think that's what this video is trying to bring, is to introduce some topics that kind of bring us back into that you know, neutral place that we need to pay attention to. Because it's not just, you know, oh, I want to start eating these foods and that's just the way it's going to be. You know, your things don't quite work that way. You know, your body's very smart. It knows what it needs.
Yeah. And again, I think the reason why I'm so interested in this topic right now as well is because there is this craze that a lot of people have gone fully carnivore, which means they are eating absolutely no fruit and no vegetables. Some people are eating some green leafies, I believe, maybe once a day, but a lot of these people are eating like literally like steaks for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And a lot of people are seeing amazing results with this in terms of knocking off some inflammation, autoimmune reversals, and stuff like that. Again, the only problem I have with this diet, and again, it's not my issue because I don't intend to really to do this. I at this point, maybe I'll let everybody else be the guinea pig on this one, but there is no real hard evidence to support. I mean, there is evidence to show that this is helping a lot of people, but there's no hard long-term studies to show that this is not somehow screwing up your microbiome by just eating this one type of food source. And long-term, you know, you really want to let things pan out for about 10 years before you decide if that is going to be something that is a diet for longevity. And that's kind of my issue with this, is a lot of people are promoting this right now, but this diet is fairly new, that we really don't know what's going to happen to these people in 10 years from now. And the thing is I've also seen on the other aspect of it where they're saying there has been studies to show that this is an optimal diet, but the only thing that I could come across was the Inuits and how a lot of them would be high into animal-based proteins, but I mean animal-based protein and animal-based fats. But if we live in Canada, so the Eskimos and the Inuit is something that I've kind of followed in the past, and their lifespan is not very long. I think, you know, generally the last statistic I saw, and of course there's a lot of things to take into a consideration there too, but I think the general lifespan is about 68 years old, when the rest of Canada is like 10 years older than that. So that's just, if people are basing it on this, like, again, Kevin and I are about eating for longevity. So that's something just to think about. Again, I know I've seen a lot of people saying that they're getting great results, but I've also seen a lot of people get great results with the raw foods vegan diet. And in that aspect, I have some issues with that diet too, because I think a lot of people, another thing I've been seeing that's very common amongst YouTube right now is a lot of people abandoning the diet now that they've been on it for like 3, 5, 6, or even up to 10 years, claiming that they're suffering with a lot of health ailments because they've been on a raw foods vegan diet for so long. And some people are getting very angry that these people are leaving this this way of, you know, I hate to say it, but it's somebody's diet. I don't know why everybody would get so involved in how everybody else eats. I know a lot of people say it's because of, you know, because people are concerned for the animals and the environment and whatnot. But in that aspect, you know, I just think any diet that you also, in this case with the raw foods vegans, and I know I'm probably going to get some flack on this, is that if you need a diet, if you need any type of supplementation on a diet, then that's not a diet for longevity, in my opinion. I think a diet should be well-rounded and include all vitamins, minerals, and nutrients. So if you're having to supplement with supplements, and this is coming from somebody that's worked in the industry for 8 years, I don't think that that's an optimal diet either, just like this carnivore diet may turn out to be 10 years from now. We don't know, right? Okay, and two other points that we kind of completely missed here was there are two things I wanted to talk about. The other thing about meat consumption is that there's this misconception that eating a lot of meat is going to create bad cholesterol. And I think Kevin and I kind of debunked this one ourselves many years ago when we started our the SCD diet to help with healing my Crohn's and colitis, because at one point, once I could introduce some foods back into my diet, the only thing I lived off of for a very long time was eggs. So I think we were going through like 1 to 2 cartons of eggs like every 1 to 2 weeks, like basically a carton of eggs a week. And I remember my doctor specifically telling me, you know, you should stop eating so many eggs, your cholesterol is going to go through the roof. And I think for a long time we ate eggs every week like that for about a year. Yeah. And our cholesterol was quite perfect, to be honest. We had never had any issues. I think where cholesterol then becomes a problem, first of all, the other thing is that cholesterol is also very imperative. Without cholesterol, you would never actually be able to convert the sun's rays over to vitamin D. That's also very important. So you need cholesterol for that reason. Secondly, I think with that is that a lot of people have this misconception about bad cholesterol and good cholesterol. And I know that there are some forms of cholesterol that are not as great for you. But again, over the years, I've read a couple of studies where having a higher base cholesterol didn't really increase people's risks of stroke and heart attack. Again, I think this gets back to the environment that you're currently in and what will drive those possibilities for heart attack and stroke and whatnot. And I don't think I think there's a lot of doctors now that are starting to realize that maybe they never got it completely right when it comes to cholesterol, and that there's a lot of other things to take into consideration. Another thing that I wanted to talk about was, you know, again, a lot of raw foods vegans and even raw carnivores now talk about enzymes and, you know, keeping those enzymes fully intact. And that's why they're eating all these foods raw. And I do 100% agree, the less enzymes that you have to use of your own, you want to be able to get that from food. So the only problem I have with that is I don't think it's very reasonable to get people to eat raw meat or eat all of their vegetables or fruit raw. I know a lot of people still enjoy cooked food. So in that case, instead of like really, I guess, penalizing people for wanting to eat like, you know, some cooked foods and whatnot, I say, why don't we kind of teach people how to cook food or prepare food properly again? And I think this is another big problem that we've seen over the years, is that everybody's talking about these very extreme diets, like everything now needs to be raw, but yet nobody really knows how to prepare food either. And that's something that I've noticed happening quite often, is like if you are going to be eating meats and stuff like that, then you know you don't want to be charring your meat either, because you're going to be creating various different things in the meat. And when you char your meat, basically the burnt parts of the meat is where you're going to be creating those carcinogens that can lend to things like cancers and stuff like that. Or what I've read is it'll create polyps that can be cancerous, especially for things like colon cancer. So you don't want to be charring your meat. You want to be eating your meat like medium rare, or you want to be eating some of your seafood closer to the rarer side too, which is why we enjoy eating oysters raw, and I really enjoy things like sashimi raw, so that's raw salmon. However, we do still cook when we eat some of our meats and stuff like that. We still do cook our meat. If we do eat red meat, we tend to eat it on the medium rare side. The other thing is with raw fruits and vegetables. A lot of people are, and again, I don't really understand what the difference is between this whole foods plant-based diet and raw foods vegans, because people say there's a difference between the two. I don't know what they are, so if you know what they are, please do leave that down in the comments below. But I think the problem with that is a lot of people aren't discussing all the anti-nutrients in some of these things. And by anti-nutrients, I've just listed off a few of them here. So you've got things like, for instance, phytic acid in some of your, like nuts and seeds and stuff like that, some of your fruits and vegetables. You got phytic acid, you got gluten, tannins, oxalates, lectins, you got saponins, trypsin inhibitors, isoflavones, salinine, and I don't even know how to pronounce this one, caconine. And so these are all things that are anti-nutrients in some of these things too. But what a lot of people are neglecting to mention is that you can release or eliminate a lot of these anti-nutrients by learning to prepare these foods properly. And in some cases, that does mean actually blanching or cooking some of these fruits and vegetables. It means fermenting some of these fruits and vegetables. It means sprouting and soaking your nuts, seeds, and legumes and learning how to do a double soak on them. So, or even grains if you eat some grains. We don't eat any grains. But these are all things that nobody really discussed either. They're just like, again, some of the carnivores were like, oh, these foods are just anti-nutrients, but they didn't mention how to release some of these anti-nutrients or eliminate some of them in some of these foods.
Yeah. Well, between these two people that I've seen, I haven't really been paying as much attention to it as Jessie has. She's been watching them like crazy, but I just see that they're very judgmental against each other, you know?
Yeah.
One side is attacking the other side is attacking the other. It's like a war going on. And
yeah.
It's diet. I mean, we all have the right to be able to choose what foods we want to eat, right? And if it doesn't agree with some people, then so what? You know, I don't think we should start judging people for that. So I think that's kind of crazy what's happening, but anyway.
Yeah, well, you've seen the videos, and the videos do get very hostile, and I think that, you know, again, this is something that and I have another thing that I kind of wanted to bring up is a lot of people say that you cannot be a spiritual being if you eat animal-based products, and I find that a little bit offensive as well, because like I said, I eat a lot of seafood, and I think, you know, the way that we're presenting this to the world right now is we're doing it from a place of being non-judgmental, and I think that's what is part of spirituality, is to be able to present this information from a unbiased perspective and allow people to make their own decisions and their own choices. And you know, these people are claiming that being this way makes you spiritual and being this way doesn't make you spiritual, or that being this way is, I mean, like, you know, it's just nonsense. And again, it's a lot of judgment going on. It's almost like people have created a war against these two specific diets, which makes me not want to be a part of either of them, to be honest.
Yeah, we're just here to raise some awareness of some things that probably people need to consider if they're going to start choosing their foods, because there's more to the story, you know?
Yeah.
So, and we have another point on here too about, you know, people, this is more the raw foods people that I've seen, you know, they're always feeling bloated, they're always feeling gassy, they're always feeling hungry too. It's like they just can't satisfy themselves with these foods. So
yeah, I wouldn't say that that's everyone.
No, but I've seen it from some people. But if that's what's happening, you know, you got to pay attention to that.
Right.
Something's not right. You know, if you're having gas constantly from all the foods you're eating, you know, you maybe might want to consider what the hell you're eating. You know.
Yeah, and I think
pay attention to that.
I think even with that's a good point that you bring up there, because I think with that too is that a lot of us have been led to believe, and I know because like I said, I've worked in the industry as well, a lot of us have been led to believe that whenever you're feeling distended or gassy or bloaty, it's just a die-off period or a detox reaction and stuff like that. And you know, I've heard some people say that that's completely BS, which that's not true either. I know, like, I've seen some carnivore people who've said, oh, you know, there's no such thing as these detox reactions or parasites and all that stuff. Having lived through that stuff and having done those, having gone through those detox reactions and gotten rid of parasites and stuff like that, especially with the two of us having Lyme disease, those are very real things, and those are things to pay attention to, which is another reason why I'm not a huge proponent of eating raw meat. Again, a lot of these people are eating grass-fed beef and stuff like that, where of course it's a cleaner source. But the thing is you're gonna open yourself up to a lot of parasites in that aspect too. So in that same instance, I don't think your body does a very good job at trying to eliminate these things either. And this is something that I've seen a lot of people saying, oh, you know, the parasites are supposed to be there, the bad bacteria that you develop from these things just make your immune system stronger. Yes, adding more and more bacteria to the microbiome is going to be a good thing, and it's going to strengthen your immune system. However, again, coming from the islands of Portugal, my family coming from the islands of Portugal, I remember my grandfather telling me a story where every 3 to 6 months, one of the it's not a natural doctor, it's actually their doctors, but they used to do a lot of herbal teas and tinctures, would go from house to house, and again, like this would have been like 50 or 60 years ago, would go from house to house to give everybody herbal teas to drink these teas, because if they were eating raw fish and stuff like that from the oceans, which my family did grow up on something called lapage, which is kind of like an oyster. It's a one-sided oyster. They would get worms and parasites, and they would need to drink these teas to kind of release these worms. They just wouldn't come out on their own. So to say that you don't need to do parasitic cleanses and that these things can't hurt you because your body will just eliminate them altogether is, I think it's completely nonsense. Like, I think both of us can agree that we've seen.
I mean, from my Lyme disease journey anyway, infection and parasites was a huge problem for me. So,
yeah.
And, you know, part of my recovery too was eating more of, I would say, almost like a vegetarian type diet with a lot of seafood.
Right.
And for me, it was, you know, one of my staples, and I highly recommend this, is raw oysters. Mm-hmm. I eat raw oysters like twice a week. I would stop off and get a couple dozen, and I would just sit and eat them. And I juiced every day, you know, my green smoothie in the morning with, you know, a lot of other stuff in there. That was kind of a staple for me. So, hey, it worked. Is it going to work for everybody? Probably not. You know? And again, I think that kind of comes back to the first topic that we talked about with blood type, you know. Type A seemed to work well with a little more vegetarian type food. And I would stand by that. It seems to be, holds true for me, you know. So, but again, I wouldn't recommend that for Jessie, because she's tried some of it. You tried juicing and different things like that.
Yeah, to be honest,
she didn't get the benefit like that.
Yeah, and the thing is again, like I said, a lot of these people are very like biased, like this is the only way to eat. For some people are not like that at all, but the thing is I did try to do some juicing, and especially in the beginning when my Crohn's and my colitis was at its worst, which is something I kind of wanted to just touch base on here too. In the beginning, when I first got sick, I could basically eat nothing. I would just eat whatever I possibly could, and for me that meant in the beginning doing a very I did an elimination diet, and I took everything out of my diet, and I think at that point I was eating basically bone broth, and Kevin was cooking me like a half a squash, and that's what I was eating, just some baked squash. That's literally what I lived off of for a couple of months at one point. So the thing is if I had to be like, you know, first of all, raw foods vegan would have never been an option for me. And then just eating meat too also wasn't an option for me, like I've said before, because I couldn't digest either of those things. And I think one of the things that we didn't even discuss at this point is because we kind of just wanted to go through some of these misconceptions that we've seen all over the internet about how everybody's basically kind of the same, or everybody will benefit off of eating the same diet, and like we've said numerous times we don't agree, is the environmental factors, about how a lot of these people are saying, well, ancestrally we ate this way, or ancestrally we ate that way. But the thing people are forgetting about is that our environment today is nothing like what our ancestors would have grown up in. And by that we mean various different things. I don't know, I mean, for instance, like we have changed the electrical grid that we've created for ourselves. This 50 to 60 hertz has really changed the way that our planet receives energy. And then our light cycles have changed because of all this blue light toxicity that we've created. And then of course that gets into some of these things like deuterium, and these are all the things that we want to really discuss in this video.